Hello, I'm Cam. Welcome back to the second channel geography video. This is a series where I talk about geography and the world and stuff. And today I wanted to talk about a recent change which has been made to Google Maps. We tend to report on all of the changes to Google Maps on this channel for two major reasons. One is that it's the backdrop to a lot of these videos. Obviously, every single Toy Cat video from now on is going to look slightly different. And the second reason is because Google Maps is the most widely used mapping app in the world. So when Google Maps changes, a lot of people's perception of not only the world map, but also the world as a whole changes alongside it. So where exactly has their perceptions changed today? Because as it turns out, this is just one I found by pure coincidence. I was browsing the map the other day, just kind of looking around Asia, like, you know, you do that sometimes, right? And I noticed that, like, Kazakhstan's capital is displaying in Russian for some reason, or at least it's not the capital city that I recognize. I've looked into going to Astana a few times, and I was like, where Astana should be, it says Nursultan. That's kind of an odd one. So before we talk about exactly why this is, you might be able to guess by the fact that it's sad this isn't describing a specific country, but it's a former, Soviet republic that had some high-ranking party officials at the time of communism. Somehow they managed to do well under the new system, managed to get elected freely and fairly, and have been in charge ever since the transition to independence. And again, that's describing a lot of different countries, but their particular leader, if you'll guess it, was called Nursultan. So Kazakhstan renames capital Nursultan in honor of veteran leader. He's been in charge since the first election after their independence, and yeah, he looks like this. And it's really interesting to me because of the fact that, like, wait a minute, you're just gonna name it after the leader unanimously too, because, again, he resigned this week after 30 years in power, and they decided, let's go ahead and name the city after him. And you might think, oh, that's kind of nice, but as it turns out, he's actually, secretly trying to, make a dynastic succession happen so that his daughter will eventually succeed him. So yeah, super strange stuff. Super strange that he's been in charge since 1989. What a happy coincidence. Wow, he sure did win a lot of elections. And yeah, basically, what was formerly called Astana is now called Nursultan. That's the change that has been made to Google Maps. And the reason this is so interesting is not just because, oh, a city's been renamed and also it has two names because it's got Cyrillic below it, but it's also interesting because this change made it to Google Maps literally a few days after happening. Notice this news story and how it says, oh, that was on March the 23rd, 2019. The fact that it took, less than 12 days to go from happening, being voted on, unanimously, by the way, like I said, to actually being a real thing, which is on Google Maps, is interesting because a lot of other countries have full-on changed their names, which still haven't made their way to the map. So yeah, I want to talk about that at least a little bit later. But first, let's dive into the fact that Nursultan, or Astana, is interesting because it's not as big of a deal as you might think to rename it. Again, it sounds like, wait a minute, they're renaming it after their former... Again, the fact that they have basically a dictator, that's the real problem. The fact that he's standing down to try and make a dynastic succession where they basically have a monarchy that's elect. That's a problem. Those are things we should talk about. But naming the city after him is actually not as controversial as you might think. So yeah, Astana was not actually the biggest city in Kazakhstan. It was actually, Almaty is the biggest city, and you can see the problems of having that be the capital. I mean, like, look at its location and proximity to other countries. Interestingly enough, actually, it's one of the, for a country to have its biggest city so close to a border, it's not uncommon, but to have it this close to neighbors that they have real issues with in a lot of places, and, to China, one of the, well, it will be the world's biggest country by population, like, when you see that, it's like, oh yeah, so I can see where there might be some issues there. Anyway, with that said, they actually relocated the capital in 1997 to what was then called Astana. So the interesting thing about this is previously, its previous name was like, it was a small village. It was basically a planned capital city, and Astana actually means in Kazakh just capital city. So they've renamed their capital city from capital to Nursultan. So again, even though I super disapprove of who they're naming it after, I think that's a rough thing. It's interesting because I always like to think about the parallels, like, is this a bad thing or is this just a fun media overflow? And it's interesting because I was trying to work out, like, I'm sure there's another capital named after a leader, and I worked it out. You know what the other capital named after a leader is? It's Washington, right? So this is Washington, D.C., or just Washington is how it's often known. It's the only other capital which is named after, again, like a founding, one of the first leader of a country, right? First leader of the independent United States of America was George Washington. I hope it's George Washington. I think it's George Washington. Anyway, and D.C. means District of Columbia, which is obviously trying to be like, oh yeah, Columbus. Anyway, so fun fact with you right there. There are two capitals now named after the founding, leader of a country. One is Washington, and the other is Nursultan. And again, when you think of it like that, it's like, again, it's rough. They shouldn't have that first leader. There's a lot of problems going on in Kazakhstan. But this is actually surprisingly less of a big deal than you might think. The bigger deal of this, I would say, is the fact that Google Maps has changed, again, Astana is now Nursultan. If you look at a map, it says that. And maybe this is because that's less controversial, but they haven't changed two country names. Again, it's been months and months since Swaziland officially declared they were turning into Eswatini. I would say it's fair not to change their name because the reason was a bit weird. Like, it was just like, we keep getting confused with Switzerland. Not good. And, like the way they did it, like it's a monarchy. I can see how, like, okay, that's rough. Don't change Swaziland. But the other country was North Macedonia, or Macedonia, FYROM, which stands for the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. I can't resist making this joke, but that means they're now the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Anyway, so Fyrom, or Macedonia, or whatever else you want to call it, is really interesting because they're called North Macedonia. It's legal. The border signs say it now. Legally, Greece will call them that. The world calls them that. But Google Maps still calls them Macedonia, or, like FYROM in brackets. And that is super interesting to me. Like, Google Maps, it changed Czechia pretty fast from the Czech Republic. Again, now their shorthand name is Czechia. It's still the Czech Republic in full, but Czechia is the name for tourism and for shorthand use, like how France is actually called the French Republic. But it's interesting that, like, oh yeah, Czechia changed fast, and, Astana changed to Sultan really fast. A few other changes like that. They happened pretty quickly. But changes that are actually really important to the perception of the world, like Macedonia, FYRM, or like Swaziland, to Eswatini, have not been made. And I can't, help but wonder, like, what is the scoop with that? What is the official logic behind when Google Maps changes something? Is there one? Is it something they even considered when they first started the mapping service, that, oh, things are going to change and we have to deal with that? Because one of the things you might not know is a lot of borders are different depending on where you check Google Maps from. So this situation right here shows all of the different claims to all of the different regions right here. Like, oh yeah, this is Jammu and Kashmir. It's kind of like India claims it, but also like Pakistan's like, so what's that all about? And also China's not sure what they really want sometimes. They got a lot of dashed lines going on there. This changes depending on where in the world you're looking from. India has their view cemented in Google. Pakistan has theirs, etc., etc. So, that was an interesting decision they had to make. They've even accidentally, like, given country territory away in the Central Americas. So, there's a lot of interesting decisions that have been made by Google, but they haven't made a decision at all on what I would say is a really key thing. Like, the Macedonia issue, or North Macedonia issue, is one which a lot of Greeks and a lot of Macedonian people and even some Bulgarians feel very strongly about. So the fact that that hasn't been officially named, it almost makes you wonder if there's like some motive on what. I'm not gonna, articulate what that might be in this video. I just think it's interesting. Kazakhstan's changed their capital, but it's like the 6th time they've done that. I'm sure when they have a new leader, they'll change it too. And there's your news today. Also, just because I think it's fun, in 2015, the most recent election in which Nursultan did contest, he actually won 97.75% of the vote. And despite the fact that he was he was leader of the country under the Communist Party, the now Communist Party is the opposition. It's just kind of weird that, like, the only party he's fighting is the Communist Party, which he was formerly in charge of. I'm just saying, like, it looks corrupt on the surface with 97.75% of the vote. It looks corrupt by the fact that it's widely considered in international organizations that there were restrictions to freedom of expression as well as the media environment. But then also, it's just damning on every level. Again, not a good guy. Probably not good to name the capital after him. But naming the capital after a leader is actually not the first time this has been done, which is interesting to me. Anyway, thank you very much for watching today's video. Oh, I should also mention, just as a fun fact, because it was previously called Astana, capital, they weren't the first country to call it that either. Fun fact, Beijing, or Peking, is just North Capital in Chinese, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, Beijing's airport code is PEK. I'm flying through there soon, and I was like, Peck? What's the deal with that? And it's because it's called Peking, still in Chinese. Anyway, fun facts with Toy Cat. Hope you all enjoy the video. Hope you got something from it. And also, the blue screen, I don't know why, just as soon as I start this video, the shadow appears and then won't disappear, and it looks a bit weird. I'm sorry for doing that to you. But, as always, you know what I'm going to say. Second channel, don't care. Goodbye.